Welcome everyone to the Polemic Pool. We're back again and we're psyched because we're going to talk about democracy again. This is Laura Castelletto saying hello, beautiful people.
And hi, I'm Jerry Bowes, and glad to be here again.
And I'm Steve Anderson, and I'm happy to be here as well.
So, Laura, we're going to do part 2, right?
Yes, I think domestic this time.
Yes, the future of democracy we talked about last time, and we were both talking about domestic and international elements of what the future of democracy could be like. Is this something that's going to hang around or not? And we tended to come back to our domestic situation. And so we decided in part 2 of this discussion to concentrate on the domestic situation. What is the future of democracy in America? And more specifically, what are the challenges to democracy? Is that right, Laura?
Yes, indeed.
All right. So who wants to kick it off?
Well, I guess if you don't mind. I had a meeting last night, a conference call with, I'm on the board of directors of this company, and anyhow, they're discussing a venue and where this venue is going to be at. And we were going to vote on this venue, and it was all based, the vote was based on the largest amount of money that particular venue could put together. And that was going to be our barometer. Well, my point is we have the same problem, I think, with voting politically in this country. I mean, ever since the Supreme Court came down and say, you know, money is free speech, it just seems like our political structure has even become more enmeshed with cash flow and you know, having a lot of money. I can't think of too many things that are detrimental to democracy when an oligarchy supersedes it. And one of the beauties about a democracy is, even though there's going to be imbalance in income, and that's fine, you know, certain people have certain skill sets and that's going to give them X amount of money a year, and other people have different ones. So people are going to be, there's going to be some disparity. But I think when our whole political system is based on cash infusion from very few people, that does not bode well for our democracy. So that's my opening statement.
Well, here's a dimension of that as it played out in our last political go-around, the elections that we just went through in regards to senators and representatives and governors, was that the majority of political ads, and in some cases the entire broadside of political ads, were done by PACs, by outside groups, and not by the candidate or the party.
Yes.
Because they figured the party and the candidate would spend its money in other areas, get out the vote,
Sure.
phone calls, etc., etc.
Yes.
So they just allowed the PACs to do all the broadsides, and consequently, you have people who have absolutely, you don't know who they are. They're making all these outrageous claims, and there's no accountability.
Right.
And there's no control by the people in the actual political process. It's simply coming from moneyed interest trying to play the game.
You know, you make a good point, and you know, the phrase we've always been able to use is follow the money. Well, you can't follow the money anymore.
Can't follow the money.
Politically laundered, if you will.
Yeah, Citizens United was a deal breaker for me.
Yeah.
Immediately I said, okay, so elections, neither party's going to represent us anymore, and that's just out the window. I think that reality is slow for people to realize what it is, you know, people go along the way they were until reality hits them in the face. And definitely the whole voting thing is completely skewed now. And in a way, it's a hopeful thing. I think it is. It's so bad that people can no longer pretend it isn't. And there are
Yes.
states slowly ratifying the ability to change that. And I think that will change in the future. So I want to kind of put a rubber stamp on that and say it's going to improve because we've hit bottom.
Well, there
on that.
are cures. I mean, we can adopt the European system if we want to have shorter elections, to have free access by the candidates to the media, so you don't have to raise huge sums to broadcast media. There's all sorts of ways to control it.
Voter tabulation, the way that we vote, is also impoverished, is the word I want to use. It reduces the number of possibilities of what we'll get and our number of choices. And across democracies in the world, there are many other systems that work far better, and that is simply science.
You mean like a parliamentary system? Is that what you're referring to?
Instant runner vote off, IRV, is one way. You will get more political parties, you will have more diversity, you will represent the people who are voting better. There are many such systems around the world that are better than ours, and you can demonstrate it, but the two parties that have our system in a death throttle don't like it because it's only the two of them. One of them always wins right now.
Right.
So
Well,
there's always half of them trying to stay with what it is.
Yeah.
So that's voting. The future of democracy as far as voting goes. And I think we just covered that rather quickly but well. Maybe we could move on to another topic.
Well, you know, we were talking just a little bit before we started to record, and we noticed that there are a number of social pressures that can influence our democracy greatly too. I feel like I've been talking a lot, but maybe I'll just name a couple and we can go on from there.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Well, for instance, income disparity creates a pressure upon the political system. I think the most famous example is the French Revolution.
Yes.
The wealth disparity at the time of the French Revolution was ridiculous. And it resulted in a catastrophic revolution and overthrow of the system.
Yes.
And we are headed to a greater and greater concentration of wealth in this country. 95% of the wealth created since the recession has gone to the upper 1%.
Yes.
That's where the created wealth has gone in this country in the last 6-7 years.
When you say upper 1%, you are talking a small fraction of that. You're talking the 1,000th%, are you not?
I don't have it specifically in mind. I don't know this, but it's less than 1%. Yes.
Yeah, it's a tiny fraction of that.
So that's where the wealth of in our country is being concentrated, and it can have great political consequence. What do you think?
Off with their heads. Oh, edit that
Well,
out.
it can, and I think the French Revolution is just a classic example of the disparity and, yeah, I mean, literally off with their heads. So, we may not have guillotines that we're going to use like the French used back then, but we can take some of that power back. But I don't know how it manifests itself, or I'm not sure how the galvanizing takes shape. There's going to be power in numbers, so that the hoi polloi, so to speak, like the us. I'm not sure how well we are able to gel together, because we're just trying to, or many of us are just trying to make a living,
Right.
and trying to survive. So it's a nice thing to say, well, darn it, it's time to to revolt and to object, but
How's it done?
how's it done?
You do know people are demonstrating in the streets right now.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, and to a much larger extent than I thought. I got to admit to Laura that there was a bigger political outcry, and quite a few demonstrations across the country,
My
still
son
ongoing.
is marching in the streets in Seattle with his own cameraman, and yeah.
It's remarkable. I don't know what kind of length and breadth it will have, but it is remarkable, and I'm encouraged by it.
Oh, sure, of course. Being a person of the '60s and
Right.
marching,
Did a
which
little
I
bit.
did, and all that kind of stuff.
Me too.
It's like deja vu all over again. But and I wonder, how much of it is race. We can say black and white cops against black young men, but maybe it's that income disparity too.
I'd like to say that is again the reality, and the people are behind it. And when we see the police brutalizing the people least able to fight back, our turn's coming next.
Right.
The police are being trained to escalate situations to the point where they can kill. This is a fact. We had this on our show here. Remember, Jeffrey sat here and said, my good friend, the police officer, is being trained to escalate situations to the point where I can shoot people. And you can see how that is playing out in the streets. The cops know how to goad people to the point where they can legally kill them. And when I heard that, I was very shocked. But now I'm hearing that from the protesters are saying the same thing. And that's when you can stop sitting back and going, well, the person who was shot was a ne'er-do-well, or there's some suspicion, it's murky, the situation, I'm not sure. I want to look at the bigger picture and say, oh, our police are supposed to serve and protect us, but instead they're doing something else. Can we put body cameras on them? Can we use the technology that we now have, please? And we're looking at the two issues coming together, the societal pressures and the government out of control and unchecked by citizen voting and citizen ability to speak out. That's where they cross right there. And I'm very interested.
I wonder if these laws in states like Stand Your Ground has kind of eroded, before if people had a confrontation, you try to diffuse it or defang the emotions or, cajole them back to a more sane kind of mindset. But it seems like a lot of police officers either lack those skills to be able to defang a potentially violent person. Some people have a gift for that, and that's what police officers, in my mind, should have. And, they keep talking about, well, you have to have a relationship with your community, and there seems to be again, there's this disparity, and there's the authoritarian police officers that are in their cars and they're not walking the beat, and, it's that group, or they don't even live in that city, with the people that they're policing. So there's just a whole lot of unhealthy kind of interaction going on, or not interaction going on.
We're a country that's at war all the time. I expect we will continue to be at war unless we have a great deal more political voice as citizens. That is what makes money for that little percent of people that Jerry mentioned, is war. So they are going to go to war. And we are now a culture of a warlike nation, and we don't mind killing. And that I see that as a huge problem. Stand Your Ground is an example of that. Police brutality is an example of that. It's okay to kill people now. And I think our media, like when I compare it to Canadian media, we do not explore issues with any kind of intelligence. And when I hear what the Canadians are discussing compared to the way we handle the same issue, I go, wow, you know, they flesh things out.
An intelligent discussion?
Yeah.
Unheard
Yeah,
of.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
we just do
Pros,
some sort
cons?
of, you know, drunken careening,
Yes.
emoting.
Yes, emoting.
But like, if we talk about a refugee camp, I think the mental picture an American gets is so flat and shallow that they can't have any understanding. They can't empathize. You know, as opposed to someone who has heard several reports on a refugee camp, which is just an example I picked out of the air. You know, what is the life like for that person? We don't have a clue, and we're not encouraged to think about it at all. What was it like in Nazi Germany? Whoa, we don't know. We just think of Hitler as a cartoon character rather than a family that's going to try and dig up the frozen earth and see if there's any potatoes left, the
Yeah.
tiny ones that they can turn into food, and just the real paranoia of it. We have no reservoir that we can draw up, and we need that. So I expect we're going to go through some difficult times, that we put ourselves in a place for that to happen. And that some will suffer, and that we will get some enlightenment out of it. We've brought it upon ourselves.
I wanted to jump in too, to go step back a second, because we've covered a lot of territory.
Sure.
I can see that we're very excited about this, because we're kind of all over the road, but
Sure.
this seems to be a very exciting topic to have.
Yes.
The one thing I want to go back on was the idea of police provocateurs. That is not a new concept. That's
No,
one of the
course.
oldest tactics in the world by authority to get the radicals, whom they consider radicals, the anti-authoritarian folks, to be just illegal enough in their activities that they can come on down very hard and very violently often. So police provocateurs, military provocateurs have been in use for a very long time in American history and throughout the world.
It has, Jerry, of course, but one thing I think that really has accentuated the issue is the incarceration rate. If you look at how many, and forget about the race, even though it is disproportionate, but how many people in general that are incarcerated in this country. And the fact that we've taken our prisons and our jails and made them privately owned for-profit
Right.
penal institutions. So now all of a sudden you have this profit motive to actually incarcerate people. You're actually making less money if you let them go free. There's incentive to keep them imprisoned.
And it's not only just a corporate incentive to keep them in prison, but the state will use prison labor for
Yes.
certain functions.
Absolutely.
And they begin to rely on that.
Oh, sure.
I think it was California, just this week I heard a case where, because of overcrowding the prison, they wanted to release a number of non-violent offenders, but the state was, well, wait a second, here is our pool of people who fight forest fires and help in drought situations and whatnot. We rely on this $2 a day labor to provide services to the state, and if you take these people away, what are we going to do? So it's corporate and it's state.
Is this a result of globalization, where we're taking, say, 8% of our labor force and sticking them in prisons because we don't need them in the labor force anymore? So now the only way we can tap that labor force is to pay them $2 an hour and lock them up?
Wow.
I'm sure that's some of the motive.
It's probably one of those invisible strength
Yeah.
factors.
And then we have judges that we have these young teens that it might be their first offense. They did something stupid. When we were young, we kind of
Got away with it.
We got away with it. We
True enough.
Slap
Oh
on the
my
hand. Our
gosh.
parents would ground us, and you dummy, and don't do it again. We have judges that are incentivized to also incarcerate them in these
True enough.
profit institutions. So it's this whole systemic.
Can you
kind of-
explain why judges are incentivized to lock people up?
They actually get a kickback.
Really?
Yeah. Either overtly or covertly. In other words, since they're for profit, they've actually found judges that were donors. What would you call them? Not stockholders, but they had incentives.
Vested interests?
Vested interest. You know, it just is. That doesn't bode well for our democracy. So, you know, I hate to sound pessimistic, but there's so many systemic problems, I guess, that it's just.
Again, I'm going to predict that we're going to have some cracks, and that they're going to cause change.
We seem to have a lot of pressures in our society, and they tend to feed an anti-democratic stance. And there's even more that are out there on the horizon. We have climate change and food issues in the future that are going to create even more pressures domestically.
Environment in general.
Environment in general, yeah. And one of the major ways that environmental change impacts us is on our food supply. Droughts in California, unable to grow wheat in Kansas, things of that sort.
Yeah, it's, there's so many different, look at the gentrification of Grand Rapids and what's happened. Downtown Grand Rapids used to be there'd be like an impoverished area. Well, this is all taken over now. I don't want to say white, but more middle class and business people are moving back to the city. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think that it's wonderful. I like to go downtown Grand Rapids. There's the art fair. There's all kinds of cool stuff. So I'm not knocking that. My only question is, where does these people that used to live in the city that are impoverished, where do they go?
They're displaced.
Yeah, they're displaced. Where?
I think that's part of the natural breathing a city does, though.
Okay.
That when housing stock gets old, poorer people live in it. And at a certain point, up until now anyway, old houses have such good bones that then people with money will come in, get them cheap, and build them back
Refurbish them.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just heard a story on gentrification on NPR yesterday, and the changes that happen in a neighborhood are subtle, as far as like land use and what behavior is acceptable.
Acceptable. Yes.
You can't have a beer on your porch anymore because you're drinking in public. But the bistro down the street has outside seating where you can drink wine.
Of course.
So,
yeah, exactly.
so there's subtle changes that happen with gentrification. It has positive and negative effects.
Of course.
And it's an ongoing thing. I mean, change is
The
constant.
design of cities is
Change is
something that
constant.
I study a lot on my own. I'm
Yeah.
very fascinated with how it changes life for the people in the city. And I think cities are a big hope for democracy at the federal level or the state level. I don't think we have much say. And when I came in tonight, before we started, I was talking to Jerry and saying there's two bills right now in Michigan, and one of them is going to restrict the rights of cities or townships to make any laws that steer spending towards local. So you can't think locally. And then there's another one coming through that says the Department of Natural Resources can't do anything that encourages biodiversity. So I saw both of those as undemocratic laws being passed at a level of beyond my reach that will affect me at the local level. And I'm not happy about such bills at all.
Well, Good point.
Why are you punching down, state?
Yeah. One of the things, just to touch on gentrification again, yes, there is the ebb and flow of cities, but here's where the impact and the crescendo of problem really gets bad. The safety net has been depleted. Today, having safety nets and social programs is taboo. You can't get elected in the area that we live if you even talk about social programs and having safety nets for people. So, you know, it's just, and then, I could go on and on. Look at the infrastructure of our city, even with all of this, the young people moving back in. If you look at a lot of our bridges, if you look at a lot of our roads, if you look at a lot of those kinds of infrastructure kind of things, I see a lot of it just deteriorating. And
But Steve, you have an iPhone.
So there are small ways that, you know, our lives are improving, but yet we're challenged in some very big ways. And even in the state today, Governor Snyder was talking about actually raising taxes in order to deal with Michigan roads because they're so awful, and that the taxes he had in mind to raise $1 billion would only raise us to good roads, not great roads, but good roads, usable roads, because of all the things that you were just talking about. So even stalwart conservatives are beginning to recognize these infrastructure problems. We have so many challenges. Can we toss out any kind of good hope, any positive points? We see all these pressures on it. Is there any way that we can overcome corporate interest and oligarchy and these anti-democratic
well, maybe
forces?
Laura's got the right point. The good news is all the bad news. Because if there's so much bad news, people will finally revolt. So there will come a tipping point in any, back to the French Revolution, you know, there finally becomes that tipping point where I won't take it anymore. And so maybe the good news is, because there is so much bad news. Isn't that your argument, pretty much?
Yay. Yeah.
I mean, it's sad way.
But I also feel that is human nature.
Yeah, of course.
It is. It's like you're personally sick, perhaps mentally. You don't get better until you've hit the bottom, and you're sick of being sick, right. So you get better.
Yes.
In the case of the government, I think we have a rat problem, and we won't go after the rats until they've gnawed away at all the grain.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, I'm wondering what kind of circumstance it'll take for people who, like the folks in Occupy Wall Street, who are left-wing, and people in the Tea Party who are anti-Wall Street as well, over on the right, actually get together and force a political movement.
Strange bedfellows.
No, I don't think so. I think it makes
share
sense.
some common
of course.
themes.
And I've always said that, and I hear people are so ridiculous with their little, factions. I've been saying that from the beginning.
Yeah.
Why are you dissing on the other little gang of people? But that's a leadership problem, I think.
Yeah.
Somebody who is a leader who doesn't just rely on
we should be wrapping up here, and it's going to take someone or some event in order to coordinate those kinds of disparate groups into one more solid political movement if we are going to be able to overcome the anti-democratic elements, capitalism.
Exactly. Well, gosh, we could have episode 3, 4, 5, and 6 and go on and
You know, we could
on.
revisit this at another time too.
Yeah.
We-
We seem to touch on it from, even when we get into other topics, it seems to be,
Well, what's your take on? We're all saying grim times ahead. So what is your take on those grim times? Because mine is pretty simple. It's like, be decent, make friends, have a plan B. Because the current reality is not going to stay as it is.
yeah, I don't see that happening. I think, I don't see us maturing emotionally based on economic disparity and the democracy deteriorating. I don't see that to catapult us into some maturity. I hate to be pessimistic, but
But we have too much stuff. So a lot of our culture is toxic anyway.
yeah.
With too much stuff, we're doing too many trivial things, and it's going to tighten up, and that makes sense.
But when we talked about simplicity a couple weeks ago, you noticed how complicated that became.
And you, Jerry?
Well, I do like your point about things getting bad before they get better.
Yes.
And I think there is a greater recognition in the country, at least. The demonstrations of late, various aspects of both the Tea Party and the leftist movements are signs of disillusionment with the current system. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what's going to bring it together. I think there's potential for reform, but there's also potential for the very opposite, for greater concentration of wealth and greater authoritarianism as well.
yeah.
I don't know how it's going to play out and who's going to win. It's going to take some reshuffling of the deck, though, for popularism to make an impact in the political world to overcome it. They're behind the 8 ball right now, I think. Whew, pessimism.
Yes.
Well,
But we
speaking
each
about-
have an individual life, and I think it's absurd to count on some kind of movements that you see out there to make change. Those guys won't do it.
well, I've been from a historian's background,
Yeah.
a student of movements, and so that's why I'm drawn to that topic.
Sure.
You're right. There is broader cultural and personal life that always goes on. I'm just thinking, what are the agents of change, and how does that come about?
I think we're all agents of change, and we do our tiny bit, and you've got to try and do that in some decent and real way.
Exactly.
Well, let's revisit this topic another time.
Sure.
And-
that sounds good.
Right now, I think it's Steve's turn to
Yes.
pick the topic for our next discussion.
Yes, it's kind of a red meat issue. It's not a new issue, but I thought, since we hadn't talked about it, that the proliferation of guns and juxtaposed against the Second Amendment, and where you think the direction is going. We talked a little bit about stand your ground, and now many states have concealed weapon. A lot of citizens have permits, and so I'm just wondering. Here's another area. So the subject is the proliferation of guns in our society. Why are we in love with guns?
All right, that sounds like a rousing
Yes.
conversation.
Yeah.
I'll try and disagree with you,
Oh, good. Well,
even when I can't.
yes. Yeah.
But I'll try. I'll try. Well,
I'm
thanks
bringing
everybody.
a pointed stick next time.
Exactly. And it's going to be at Laura's.
At my pad.
Yeah. Very good.
All right.
Well, it's always wonderful talking to you too, and everybody out there, have a good rest of your day or week.
Big mixed weather kiss.
All right, take care till next time.
Yep. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Bye.